Tristan Hale didn't believe in fate, but the second he stepped into the cramped Brooklyn bookstore, he knew something was about to change. He hadn't planned to be there. His driver had taken a wrong turn, and instead of heading to the private tasting at Le Jardin, Tristan had found himself parked in front of a hole in the wall place with a hand-painted sign, "Open Mic Poetry Night." For reasons he couldn't explain, he told his driver to wait and walked in. The place smelled like old books and cinnamon tea. Mismatched chairs were packed together, with barely any room to breathe. The walls were lined with used novels, and a small makeshift stage stood under dim yellow lights. It was the opposite of his world: no marble floors, no polished silver, no whispered deals over $10,000 bottles of scotch. He should have turned around. But then she stepped on stage. "Hi," the woman said, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "I'm Callie Summers." She was wearing jeans and an oversized gray sweater. No designer labels. No makeup except maybe some lip balm. She held a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and a mug in the other. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "This one's about feeling invisible," she said. "It's called Train Station Ghost." Tristan didn't blink the entire time she read. Her words weren't polished. They weren't perfect, but they were raw, real, honest in a way no one in his life ever was. He wasn't used to people who spoke without an agenda. He definitely wasn't used to people who looked like they'd cried before writing every sentence. When she stepped off stage, the room clapped politely. Tristan stood up. Callie noticed him instantly. He stood out like a sore thumb in his tailored charcoal coat, cashmere scarf, and leather boots. He looked like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to Wall Street. She gave a small, polite smile and headed for the back, probably to hide. Tristan didn't hesitate. He followed her, weaving through the crowd. "Hey," he said, catching up to her near the bookshelf labeled Romance. She turned, surprised. Hi. I'm Tristan." "Okay," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You here for someone?" "No. I just wandered in." She crossed her arms. "You wandered into a poetry reading?" He shrugged. "And I'm glad I did." Callie stared at him for a second like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or run. "You don't look like the poetry type, and you don't look like someone who can freeze a room with a few lines." That made her smile. It was shy and suspicious, like she wasn't used to compliments. "Well," she said finally, "thanks for listening. Maybe you could tell me about the next time you'll be reading. I'd like to hear more." She blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." Callie hesitated, then pulled a folded flyer from her bag and handed it to him. "Next Thursday. Same place." "I'll be there," he said. Before she could respond, one of her friends called her name from across the room. She gave him a nod, then walked off. Tristan stood there for a moment, staring at the flyer. That night, he didn't go to the tasting. He didn't return calls, didn't answer emails. He just kept thinking about the way she looked when she read, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone, like she was finally breathing. Over the next week, he found himself Googling her name more than once. Nothing came up. She had no website, no social media. She was practically invisible online. That only made him more curious. By Thursday, he was back at the bookstore. This time, she noticed him right away. "You actually came," she said, walking over before the event started. "I thought you were just being polite." "I don't do polite," he said. "I do honest." She laughed. "That's a bold thing to admit." He leaned against the bookshelf beside her. "I'm a bold kind of guy." Callie tilted her head. "All right, bold guy. Why are you here?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about your poem." That shut her up. She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." That night, she didn't read another poem. She let someone else take her spot. Instead, they sat in the corner of the bookstore and talked. For hours. About what she wrote, why she wrote, how she lived in a tiny studio above a bakery and worked 3 jobs: barista, bookstore clerk, and part-time copy editor. about how her mom had passed 5 years ago and how she hadn't written anything worth keeping for almost 6 months until that night. She asked him about his life. He lied. He said he worked in finance. Left it vague. Said he liked art and books and silence. He didn't mention the billion-dollar tech firm he owned. The penthouse overlooking Central Park. The private jet. The board meetings. He didn't want to scare her off. Because something about Callie made him want to be someone else. Not less. Just real. A week turned into 2. Then 3. He took her to a small jazz club in the village. She took him to a dive bar with open mic comedy. He bought her used poetry books with handwritten notes in the margins. She brought him coffee in a paper cup with a heart scribbled in black ink. They talked about everything. And nothing. He wanted to kiss her every time she laughed. She didn't ask questions about his money, and he didn't lie more than he had to. For the first time in years, his life felt like it wasn't drowning in pressure. But then came the night that cracked everything open. They were walking after dinner ramen and canned beer, and it started raining. She didn't run. She stood still in the middle of the sidewalk, arms stretched, laughing. He pulled her close, soaked and breathless, and kissed her. She kissed him back like she'd been waiting for it since the first night. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "I think I'm in trouble." He looked at her, heart pounding. "Why?" "Because I haven't felt like this in a long time." He brushed a wet curl from her cheek. "Then we're both in trouble." Neither of them noticed the photographer across the street, snapping a photo that would hit every business blog the next morning. Billionaire tech tycoon Tristan Hale spotted kissing mystery woman in Brooklyn. And just like that, her quiet world collided with his. Tristan stared at the headline on his phone, seated alone in the back of his Maybach, the windows fogged with morning condensation. The grainy photo showed him holding Callie in the rain, her face turned up to his, eyes closed, lips inches from his. His jaw tightened. "Where did this come from?" he asked, not looking up as his assistant, Lucas, slid into the seat beside him. "Freelancer. Sold it to the Pulse. It's already been picked up by 3 more outlets. They're calling her your mystery girlfriend." Tristan closed his eyes for a long moment. "Damage control." Lucas hesitated. "You want me to deny it?" "No. But don't feed it either. No statements. No name confirmations." He could feel Lucas watching him, waiting for some deeper explanation. He didn't give one. "I'll handle it," Lucas said quietly, then stepped out. Tristan stayed in the car. For the first time in years, he had no desire to go into the office. Instead, he called the only person who mattered right now. She didn't answer. He didn't blame her. When he finally found her that evening, she wasn't at the bookstore or the cafe across the street. She was sitting on the curb behind the bakery, knees drawn to her chest, hoodie pulled up despite the warm air. He approached slowly, hands in his coat pockets. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. Callie didn't look at him. "You didn't mean for someone to take a photo? Or you didn't mean for me to find out who you are?" Tristan sat beside her, the concrete still damp from the rain. "I wasn't hiding who I am. I just didn't want that to be the first thing you knew." She pulled her sleeves over her hands. "You told me you worked in finance." "I do. Technically." Callie let out a short breath, more of a scoff than a laugh. "You're the founder of HaleTech. You've been on the cover of Forbes. You own a building in Midtown." He didn't respond. "I Googled you," she added, "after I saw the article. After my phone started buzzing with blocked numbers and reporters showed up at the front counter asking for a quote." Tristan turned to her. "I didn't think it would get out. You kissed me on a public street. I wasn't thinking about cameras. I was thinking about you." Callie looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw something cold flicker behind her eyes. "I write poems about being invisible," she said. "Not for attention. Not to be discovered. But because I don't want people watching me. And now I'm in every gossip blog in the city." He reached for her hand. She didn't move. "I'll make it stop," he said. "You can't," she replied. "You might be used to this, but I'm not. I can't breathe with people looking at me like I'm some accessory. Some fluke. You're not." Callie stood. I need space. He rose too. Callie, I don't want to be part of your world. He flinched. You are. You already are. She shook her head, backing away. Not like this. By the time she turned the corner and disappeared into the alley, Tristan was alone with the sound of the bakery's back door slamming shut. The next morning, a new headline surfaced. A columnist speculated Callie was a strategic distraction to soften Tristan's image amid rumors of a hostile takeover at Hale Tech. Another article accused her of being a poet-turned-gold digger. Tristan punched the wall of his penthouse gym. He'd protected his privacy so ruthlessly over the years. No one dared publish anything that wasn't pre-approved by his legal team. But this wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, and she was breaking under the weight of it. He didn't call her again. Instead, he went to the bookstore and left a sealed envelope with her name written in his clean, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a key. No note, no explanation, just a silver key wrapped in velvet. She didn't use it. 3 days passed. Then 4. Tristan shelved 2 board meetings, postponed a product launch, and told his PR team to issue a statement. Mr. Hale declines to comment on his private life. But none of it mattered if she wouldn't speak to him. On the 5th day, he walked into the bookstore just before closing. The lights were dimmed, the bell above the door chiming softly. She was behind the counter, restocking a shelf of poetry anthologies. She didn't look up. I thought you needed space, he said, voice low. I did. He stepped closer. And now, Callie slid the last book into place. Now I need the truth. He exhaled. Ask me anything. She turned to face him. Why me? Tristan didn't hesitate. Because your words made me feel something I haven't felt in years. That's not an answer. They made me feel human. Callie crossed her arms. You could have told me the truth from the start. I know. I thought if you knew who I was, you'd see the money first. The company. The headlines. But you didn't. You saw me. And I wasn't ready to lose that. She searched his face, and for the first time in days, there was no fear in her expression, just quiet, aching curiosity. What was the key for? She asked. He stepped forward, pulling something from his coat pocket. It was a folded piece of paper. I bought the building across the street, he said. The brownstone with the boarded-up windows. Callie's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. I want to turn it into a poetry house. Readings, workshops, a space for writers who can't afford the city. She unfolded the paper. It was a deed. Her name was typed at the bottom, listed as co-founder. You bought a building, she said slowly, because I read a poem about being invisible. No, he replied. I bought it because you made me want to be seen. She looked up at him, and something in her eyes shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but something warmer. Something that cracked through the wall she'd been building. You still should have told me, she whispered. I know. Callie glanced down at the paper again, then back at him. I'm not a project, she said. I know that too. A long silence passed between them. Then, finally, she whispered, You could have just asked me to dinner. I was afraid you'd say no. She handed the paper back. I'm not saying yes yet. But you're not walking away. Callie picked up the key from the counter where she'd left it days ago. She turned it over in her palm. Not yet, she said. Then she walked past him and out into the night. Tristan didn't follow. He knew now if she came back, it would be entirely her choice. The old brownstone still smelled of dust and varnish, but the walls were bare now, stripped down to their bones. Callie stood in the middle of the front room, her hair piled carelessly atop her head, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she eyed the beams above her. Tristan entered quietly, but she didn't turn. She already knew he was there. You actually bought this place? She asked without glancing back. I did. And you want to turn it into a poetry house? Yes. She finally looked at him. What happens when the press finds out? When they start calling it the Tristan Hale Charity for the Artistically Unhinged or something. I don't care what they call it. He stepped further in, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. And they won't find out unless you want them to. She leaned against the exposed brick wall, arms folded. Why me? Why not just write a check and have your lawyers run the place? Because you've lived it, he said. You know what it means to need space and not have it. You understand what it feels like to create something no one sees. Callie studied him. You're not trying to fix me, right? No, he said without hesitation. I'm trying to build something with you. She let that sit in the air between them. I don't want my name on a plaque, she said after a moment. I want control over the programming, the events, the writers we bring in. You'll have it. And I don't want to be anyone's secret girlfriend. You're not. She tilted her head. Then what am I? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. You're the only person I've ever wanted without knowing why, he said. And the more I know, the more I want. Her breath caught, but she didn't move. Say something, he added. Callie looked down at her fingers. There was sawdust on her jeans, a streak of paint on her wrist. I'm not used to people letting me choose, she murmured. My dad left when I was 8. Every man since has either tried to rescue me or disappear when I didn't need rescuing. I'm not going anywhere, he said. You say that now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Blueprints. For the renovation. She raised an eyebrow. You carry building plans around New York? I had a feeling I'd need them today. She took the paper and knelt to spread it on the floor. He crouched beside her. You want to knock out this wall? She asked, pointing to the far end of the sketch. It'll open up the light. And we can put in a small stage. With seating? Modular benches. Movable. We can host workshops or readings depending on what you plan. She traced the lines of the design silently. Then she looked at him. You really want to do this? I already am. Callie exhaled slowly, then nodded once. Okay. Tristan's eyes searched hers. Okay. I'll help you build it. But I'm not promising anything else. He nodded. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. She folded the plans again and handed them back. Good. Because I'm still deciding how I feel about you. I can wait. That sounds dangerous, she said. He stood, offering her a hand. It probably is. She ignored the hand and rose on her own, brushing off her jeans. I'll need full access to the budget, by the way. You'll have it. And I want to bring in local artists. The ones who don't have names or resumes. You're in charge. She narrowed her eyes. You say that like it's easy for you. It's not, he admitted. But I trust you more than I trust anyone else. Her expression softened, but just for a moment. Come back tomorrow, she said. There's an architect meeting, and I'll need you to sign off on the electrical work. I'll be here. She turned and started toward the door, then paused. I used the key. He blinked. What? The one you left me. I used it. A beat passed. Did you like what you saw? She glanced over her shoulder. You have terrible taste in kitchen tile. Tristan laughed, the sound low and startled. Noted. Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the front steps. That night, he stood at the window of his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. His phone buzzed with messages he ignored: investor updates, acquisition offers, reminders from Lucas about the quarterly meeting. He didn't care. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing the next deal or number. He was waiting on a woman who made him work for every bit of her trust. And that made her the most valuable thing in his world. The next morning, she was already at the brownstone when he arrived, coffee in one hand, a folder of revisions in the other. You're late, she said, without looking up. I brought croissants. Then you're forgiven. He followed her inside, and together they stepped over exposed wires and half-finished walls. She was talking about soundproofing and acoustic panels, her voice animated, her hands moving as she walked. He didn't interrupt. He just watched her. The way she came alive when she believed in something. The way her words took shape in the air, just like her poems. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't falling in love with her anymore. He already had. The first reading at the new poetry house was scheduled for a Thursday evening 6 weeks after they'd started renovations. The walls had been painted a deep, moody blue. The lighting was warm and low, carefully placed to make the space feel like a cocoon rather than a stage. Callie had chosen every fixture, every salvaged wood shelf, every mismatched chair. Tristan had signed off on the budget without a single question. He arrived just before the doors opened, wearing a dark jacket over a navy button-down, sleeves rolled, no tie. He looked like a man who belonged to the city but had stepped away from the boardroom. Callie noticed. She didn't comment. Instead, she nodded toward a stack of programs on the small table by the entrance. "We ran short. Can you print a dozen more?" He took the flash drive without asking where the printer was. He knew he'd installed it last week when she was debating font styles and forgot she hadn't eaten all day. By 7, the room was full. Local writers filled the chairs. Some familiar faces from the bookstore. A few older poets Callie had quietly admired for years. No press. No cameras. Every person in the room had been invited personally. Callie stood near the back, watching the first reader, a teen with shaking hands but a steady voice. She didn't notice Tristan watching her until she turned and caught his gaze. He didn't look away. When the last reader finished, applause filled the room like a small storm. And then people lingered. They always did after readings. It was the unspoken rule: words needed space to settle. Callie moved through the crowd with quiet grace, answering questions, introducing guests to one another, giving encouragement where it was needed. She looked like she belonged not just in the space, but in command of it. Tristan waited until most had left before approaching her. She was gathering empty mugs from the counter, her sleeves pushed up, hair loosely tied. "You didn't read," he said. "I wasn't ready." "But you will be?" She looked at him, a question in her eyes. "Are you asking as the man who funded this place, or the one who kissed me in the rain?" "I'm asking as the one who's still trying to deserve both your time and your trust." Callie set the last mug down. "You're not exactly subtle. Not when it comes to you." She leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," he said, and she rolled her eyes but smiled. "I don't know if I'm built for your world. The suits, the strategy, the constant calculation. I'm not asking you to live in it. I'm asking you to let me into yours." She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "You're not just the man who showed up at a poetry reading anymore." "I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to be the man who shows up for you. Always." There was no audience now. No pretense. Callie stepped forward. "You know what scares me?" "No." "That this might not be a phase. That I might actually want you in my life for real. And I don't know if I can handle what comes with that." "You don't have to handle anything alone. That's the point." He took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I've had enough of people needing me to be small," she said. "You're the first person who didn't try to edit me. And you're the first person who ever made me question what I thought I wanted." Callie laughed under her breath, but it was soft, warm. "This doesn't feel real." He squeezed her hand. "Then let me make it real." "How?" Without a word, he pulled something from his coat pocket. A small, leather-bound book. Her handwriting was on the cover. The first poem she'd ever read aloud in that bookstore. She stared. "Where did you get this?" "You left it on the counter the night I followed you to the back shelf. I kept it. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't let it go." She opened the book. Her pages, her edits, her raw, unfiltered thoughts. It was her past, her voice, her heart. And he kept it safe. "I thought I'd lost this." "You didn't. You just didn't know someone else valued it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You always know exactly what to say." "That's new," he said. "Usually I'm just hoping I haven't ruined everything." She closed the book, holding it to her chest. "You didn't ruin anything. You gave it a place to grow." He stepped closer. "Then let me give you more." Callie looked up at him, eyes clear. "More." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a delicate chain with a silver pendant, a vintage typewriter charm, small and understated. Not flashy, not expensive, but thoughtful. "I saw this last week. Bought it before the opening. I didn't know if you'd want it, but it reminded me of you, of the way your words feel." She took it gently from his palm, fingers brushing his. "I want it." He fastened it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. When he met her eyes again, there was no hesitation left in either of them. "You're not a distraction to me," he said. You're the destination. This time, when she kissed him, it wasn't tentative. It was a promise. Later that night, after the chairs were stacked and the windows locked, they stood alone in the middle of the poetry house. The city buzzed beyond the walls, but inside it was quiet. "I'll read next time," Callie said softly, her head resting against his chest. "I'll be front row." She looked up. "You always are." He kissed her forehead. "And I always will be." They didn't need a stage or a spotlight. Not anymore. They had something better. A space built from truth. A love born from words. And a future that finally felt like their own. Together. The soft clink of crystal echoed through the high-ceilinged space as Callie adjusted the delicate florals along the banquet table, her fingers brushing against petals the color of coral and cream. She stepped back, eyeing the arrangement with a critical gaze. The poetry house had been transformed for the evening tables brought in, candles flickering along the windowsills and a quiet quartet tuning their instruments in the corner. "You're not going to let the planner do her job?" Tristan's voice was warm behind her. Callie turned, her lips curving. "I'm not used to letting go of the details." He stepped closer, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve with deliberate gentleness. "You're getting better at it." "Am I?" she asked, glancing at him. "You didn't hover when I ordered the custom lighting. You ordered it without telling me. And you loved it." She let out a breath. "Fine. I did. But that doesn't mean I'm handing over the flower decisions." "You can keep the flowers," he said, his tone low. "As long as I get the first dance." Callie tilted her head. "You hate dancing." "I hate dancing with strangers." "You're not a stranger." She reached for the ribbon tied around her wrist and pulled it loose, letting it fall. "It's strange," she said softly. "How fast things settled. How right this feels." Tristan took her hand. "It's not strange. It's what happens when the right things finally find their place." Guests began to arrive slowly, friends from the poetry community, a few familiar faces from the bookstore, and several quiet supporters who had helped fund the program Callie had launched, a free mentorship series for young writers in the city. No press had been invited. No cameras, no headlines. Just people who understood the value of words and the space to share them. As the evening unfolded, Callie stood at the back of the room, watching one of her students, a shy girl named Marcy, read a poem about silence. The room was still, listening. Tristan stood beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "She's better than I was at that age," Callie whispered. "You taught her how to be brave," Tristan said. "I didn't teach her. I just gave her the mic." Tristan turned toward her. "And that's why they listen. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to let others speak." Callie looked up at him. "You know, I used to think being seen was the goal. It's not. No. Being understood is." He leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. "Then you're the most understood woman in this room." After the readings, the quartet began to play a slow, soulful tune. Tristan extended a hand. "You promised me the first dance." Callie hesitated, then slipped her hand into his. "Don't say I didn't warn you if you step on my toes. I'll buy you new shoes." She laughed as he led her to the center of the room. The other guests watched, but no one interrupted. They moved together slowly, her hand resting on his shoulder, his thumb brushing circles against her back. "You're not terrible at this," she said. "I'm pacing myself." "For what?" He met her eyes. "The rest of our lives." She stopped moving. "That's a bold thing to say." "I told you. I don't do polite." Callie stared at him, her heart pounding the way it had the first time he'd walked into that bookstore. "You're serious?" "Absolutely." He reached into his jacket and pulled something from the inside pocket, a small velvet box. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't make a speech. He simply opened it and held it out. Inside was a ring, vintage, delicate. A single oval sapphire framed by tiny diamonds. It didn't shout. It whispered, "I don't want to change you. I just want to stand beside you. Build with you. Love you," he said. "Will you marry me?" Callie didn't speak. Her chest rose and fell once. Then again. She pressed her lips together, eyes shining. Yes, she said finally, voice breaking. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. I never thought I'd have this, she whispered. Not like this. You earned it, he said. Every word. Every moment. They kissed again, not hungry, not urgent, but deep and certain. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the candles had burned low, they sat curled on a velvet couch beneath the tall window of the poetry house. Her legs were draped over his lap, his coat wrapped around her bare shoulders. Do you think people like us ever really slowed down? She asked sleepily. I don't think we need to, he replied. I think we just find better reasons to move forward. She traced the edge of his collar with her fingertip. What's our next reason? He kissed her knuckles. You tell me. Callie looked around the space they'd built together. I want to host a residency, she murmured. Bring in writers from out of state. Give them a place to stay, time to breathe. Done. I want to publish an anthology. Let's do it. She smiled. You don't even ask for details. I don't need them. I have you. He pulled her closer. Outside, the city moved like it always had, fast, bright, impossible to control. But inside the poetry house, everything was still. The next spring, they were married in the garden behind the brownstone, surrounded by poets and booksellers, baristas, and college kids with notebooks in their pockets. Callie wore a simple white dress and bare feet. Tristan wore the same navy suit he'd worn the night he saw her read for the first time. There was no press, no headlines, just a promise. They spent their honeymoon on the coast of Portugal in a villa with no Wi-Fi and too many sunrises. He read her poems while she wrote on the terrace. She taught him how to make coffee without a machine. He bought her a second-hand typewriter from a local antique seller and carried it in his lap on the flight home. 2 years later, the poetry house expanded into the building next door. Callie ran the programming full-time. Tristan invested in a literacy initiative that brought books into underserved schools. They hosted readings, workshops, quiet dinners with loud laughter and louder ideas. Their home upstairs was filled with pages taped to the walls and coffee mugs that never matched. They didn't slow down. They just moved in the same direction. Together.